what if technology could fundamentally reshape how we create life? I mean, really think about it. Designer babies, maybe gestation entirely outside a human body. What does that do to our idea of being human, of family?
It's a huge question.
Right. So today, we're doing a deep dive into this pretty mind-bending area where transhumanism meets human reproduction. This is the deep dive.
And we got some interesting material to draw on. There's an article from DurgyPark looking right at the ethics of these transhumanist reproductive ideas.
Yeah, and another piece from Biblioteca Nauki connecting AI and transhumanism, plus the big Wikipedia overview on transhumanism itself, and Nick Bostrom's essay on the ethics side.
So lots to unpack.
Definitely. We're going to explore what these sources suggest about the future of, well, how we might have kids.
Okay, so let's start with the core idea. Transhumanism at its heart is this drive, right? To use technology, AI, biotech, nanotech, you name it, to overcome what we see as human limitations. Aging, disease.
Even our cognitive limit.
Exactly. And when you turn that focus onto reproduction, it suddenly opens up some really radical, almost science fiction possibilities.
It really does. And this term morphological freedom keeps coming up in the context of reproduction. It's this idea that, well, maybe we shouldn't just accept biological reproduction as it is.
Right. The argument is we should maybe actively use technology to enhance the whole experience, maybe even, evolve beyond our current human state, a post-human future, through changes in how we reproduce.
So what are the actual technologies being talked about? What can make this real?
Well, there's quite a range. You've got things like in vitro gametogenesis, IVG, imagine creating sperm or eggs from basically any cell.
Wow, okay.
That alone could massively change who can have biological children. Maybe even a single person could. Then you have gene editing, like CRISPR.
Right, the designer baby possibilities.
Exactly. Selecting traits, modifying genes in embryos, and artificial wombs, things like that biobag tech they use for, I think it was lambs.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
It sort of hints at a future where the whole 9 months could happen, outside a person.
Artificial wombs for humans? It does sound like straight up sci-fi. It forces you to totally rethink pregnancy, birth, everything. And this idea pushes even further, right? Extending reproductive freedom even to things like mind clones. Where does that feed in?
It gets right to the core transhumanist ambition, really. It's like saying maybe our current human form, our way of experiencing things, is just one stage.
Stepping stone?
Kind of. And by pushing reproductive tech, the hope is to unlock, well, maybe totally new ways of being, feeling, thinking that we can't even imagine now, maybe more valuable ways.
Okay, but this is where it starts getting ethically complicated.
Right.
Because changing something so fundamental, how we create life, it inevitably clashes with some deeply held principles. That DurgyPark article really digs into this. Let's start with non-maleficence. First, do no harm.
Yeah, that's a big one. The article points out, okay, there's optimism about the tech, sure, but there's also a real risk of misuse. Things going wrong in ways that could cause, serious harm, maybe even existential harm.
And it's not just physical harm, is it?
No, exactly. It's also about the social side.
Yeah.
How do you even measure the risk of, say, deepening social inequalities?
Right.
Or eroding certain values if we start messing with our fundamental biology this way? It's hard to quantify.
Okay, then what about beneficence? The idea of acting for someone's good. The article mentions procreative beneficence. That sounds slightly different from the usual meaning.
It is a twist, yeah.
Yeah.
Procreative beneficence is the idea that maybe parents have a moral duty, or at least a reason, to choose the embryo they think will have the best chance at the best possible life. But then you immediately think, well, who defines best? And you can see how easily that slips towards eugenics, right? This idea of actively trying to engineer better humans through selection. It's a worry.
Which logically leads to autonomy, respecting choice, informed consent. That seems incredibly tricky with these kinds of experimental reproductive techs.
Absolutely. The article highlights that. How do you get truly informed consent when the tech is brand new and maybe even the experts don't fully grasp the long-term effects? Can you meaningfully agree to something with so many unknowns?
And what about the child's autonomy later on?
Right. Issues like parental expectations, maybe even rejecting a child if they don't meet certain enhanced criteria, medical liability. It gets very complex very fast.
Then there's justice, fair access. You mentioned cost earlier. It seems obvious these advanced technologies would be super expensive, at least at first.
That's a critical ethical point. The DurgyPark piece really flags the concern that if only the wealthy can afford these enhancements, you could end up with a massive societal split, like a genetically enhanced super species, while others don't even have basic health care.
That seems like a direct challenge to the idea of equal opportunity.
Totally. Now, the counter-argument you sometimes hear is, oh, technology gets cheaper over time. And maybe it will. But in the meantime, you could see huge social tension, new kinds of hierarchy. It's a serious ethical problem.
And lastly, this idea of human dignity. It feels like some people would argue that fundamentally altering our human nature through this tech undermines something essential, something inherent.
Exactly. Many ethical traditions hold that there's an intrinsic value, a dignity, in just being human as we are, naturally. Radically changing that, especially around birth and reproduction, it forces these really deep philosophical questions about what humanity even is.
So, okay, we've got the transhumanist vision and the ethical pushback, but the Durgy Park article also presents this important counterpoint, the value of natural birth and raising kids the old-fashioned way. It's not just biology, is it?
No, and what's really interesting there is the focus on birth as, like, formative for our identity, for how families connect. They mention cooperative breeding, this idea that raising kids together is fundamental to human social structure. Birth isn't just seen as a medical event to manage. It's a source of really unique human experiences.
Yeah, it talks about the depth of the parent-child bond, that specific kind of love, almost as a pathway for human development itself. And it even mentions natal philosophies, viewing pregnancy and birth as this incredible physical feat, almost like running a marathon.
Precisely. And think about Hannah Arendt. She saw birth as the source of all novelty, of action entering the world. Then you have people like Sarah Buckley arguing that the specific mix of pain and hormones like oxytocin in natural birth might actually benefit both the mother and the baby's bonding and development.
Which might explain why, even with safer C-sections available when needed, or formula, some people still strongly prefer natural birth and breastfeeding.
Right. It acknowledges that maybe some of the difficult parts of natural birth, those sort of evolutionary trade-offs, they might actually build resilience. And it stresses how crucial help during childbirth has always been in human societies. Community support.
It's suggesting that maybe overcoming all the challenges of birth isn't necessarily the goal.
Yeah, it seems to suggest that the process itself, challenges included, generates a lot of positive outcomes. Social glue, you could say.
Okay, let's pivot slightly and bring AI, artificial intelligence, into this. That Biblioteca Naoki introduction touches on this. How does AI fit into the transhumanist picture for reproduction specifically?
Well, AI is seen as a key enabling technology for a lot of transhumanist goals, reproduction included. You could see it being used to, say, enhance cognitive or emotional capacities relevant to parenting.
How so? Like AI tutors for kids or?
Potentially, yeah. Or maybe AI tools to help foster empathy or optimize early learning environments, things like that. Even supporting physical enhancements indirectly.
That's interesting. And then there are the more way out ideas, like transferring consciousness to computers. How does that relate to reproduction?
In those more speculative scenarios, biological reproduction might become, well, less central. If your consciousness can be uploaded, backed up, maybe copied, is that a form of reproduction? Extending life indefinitely, creating digital descendants.
Oh.
It totally shifts the definition, opens up a whole new can of worms about identity, continuity, what it even means to have children.
And just using AI in the reproductive decisions we make now seems ethically loaded, like AI helping choose embryos.
Exactly. If AI algorithms start guiding selections based on predicted traits or genetic profiles, you have to worry about bias baked into the AI. What values is it optimizing for? Who programmed it? And who's ultimately responsible if things go wrong based on AI recommendation? It's tricky.
This really loops back to the big societal debates. The Wikipedia entry mentions this tension. Are we aiming for betterment, just improving health, maybe lifespan, or are we talking about fundamental transformation of what it means to be human?
That's a core fault line in the whole discussion. Critics raise the alarm about losing something fundamentally human. Maybe our shared vulnerability, our capacity for empathy that comes from that shared biology, the messy, unpredictable parts of life.
And that fear of greater social inequality keeps cropping up, this potential genetic divide.
Yeah.
Enhanced versus unenhanced. It sounds pretty dystopian.
It does. The sources mention fears of society splitting, basically. Two tiers of humanity with vastly different abilities and life chances, and also the risk of these technologies being used coercively, like authoritarian eugenics, where choices aren't freely made.
But the transhumanists themselves, people like Bostrom, they often argue differently, don't they? They're not necessarily aiming for that divided future.
That's true. Often the argument from proponents is more focused on enhancements that could benefit everyone: better health, sharper minds, greater emotional well-being. They tend to be more cautious, or at least say they are, but enhancements that just give a positional advantage, making someone better than someone else. The stated goal is often lifting the tide for all boats.
The Dirty Park article also brings up the government's potential role. Is this all just down to individual choice, or could we see states getting involved, maybe mandating or banning certain reproductive technologies?
Yeah, that's another layer of complexity. You've got strong arguments for individual reproductive freedom on one side. On the other, concerns about fairness and access might lead some to argue for government regulation, maybe even subsidies to prevent inequality. And then there's the sheer scale of the potential long-term impact on society. Governments might feel they have to weigh in. It's a real tightrope walk.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it's incredibly clear that where transhumanism meets reproduction, we find this landscape filled with, well, amazing possibilities, but also some really profound challenges.
Definitely. We're looking at potentially radical shifts in creating life, side by side with huge ethical questions about fairness, what it means to be human, the nature of family, birth itself.
It really throws the spotlight on that interplay between our technological reach and our fundamental human values.
Absolutely. It's a tension we're going to be grappling with more and more, I think.
And it leaves you, the listener, with a pretty big thought to chew on. As we approach these potential transformations, what parts of being human, of reproduction, of identity are really essential? What should we strive to protect? And how do we even begin to navigate these powerful new capabilities responsibly?
That's the question to keep asking yourself, isn't it?
If this deep dive got you thinking about the future of reproduction and transhumanism, definitely give us a thumbs up and subscribe to The Deep Dive. We explore the cutting edge of science, tech, and how it impacts all of us.
Yes, subscribe for more deep dives into complex topics. And please, share your thoughts. What questions do you still have about transhumanism and reproduction? Let us know in the comments below. We genuinely want to hear your perspectives.